Hello, remarkable educators. For those of you who have been listening to the 10-Minute Teacher for a while, you will know that every so often, not many, I think there's less than 10 episodes, I will air a bonus extended episode where I interview an unsung hero of mine. Today is one such episode. It is much longer than 10 minutes, and that's okay. Miss Sharon Howard has just retired after 44 years of teaching kindergarten. This school year, 2020-2021, she taught every single day of in-person school without missing a day with her students. I sat down with her during post-planning this year and just let her share her heart. I hope that you will love Miss Howard as much as I do, and that you will tweet me at CoolCatTeacher or send me an email to Vicki, Vicki, at CoolCatTeacher.com, and I'll pass your words along to Miss Howard. Here we go.
Welcome to the 10-Minute Teacher podcast, hosted by author, educator, speaker, and mom, the Cool Cat Teacher, Vicki Davis.
Today we have a pleasure to interview one of my heroes, Miss Sharon Howard. She is a K-5 teacher, kindergarten teacher here at my school. And she is retiring after 44 years of working with the students right now in May of 2021. And I've asked her to sit down with us and just share some timeless truths about working with children, some of her stories, and also I think you'll be interested to hear her brave story. She's just finished up one whole year in all of this pandemic of face-to-face instruction. I don't think y'all missed a day, did you, Miss Howard?
No, ma'am.
They did not miss one day, every single day, with her kindergarten face-to-face. So she's a remarkable woman. And so, Miss Howard, you are retiring. How does that feel to think about, because teaching has been such a part of your life, hasn't it?
Oh, yes. Yes, definitely. That's been my main goal, is to maintain my family the best that I could. My husband was very supportive. Most of the time he was up here after he retired to help me with bulletin boards and all of my book collection, because that's what I've done for 44 years, is collect children's books. And so he's been very much a part of my educational experience. And he's done everything except sit through a day of class with me to actually know what all this is about.
Now, at your retirement discussion, and we're going to talk big picture, but at your retirement discussion, something was very interesting that was said. A person who had a child who was a behavior problem before he came to you said his wife at parent-teacher night before school starts sat down with you and said, "What are you going to do when my child misbehaves?" What was your answer and why?
Well, I just explained to the mom. She wanted to know my discipline procedures. And I said, I don't plan on having any discipline issues. Right from the very first day of school, I set high standards for my children. And I think a lot of it has to do with the way that I talk to them and come across, meaning business, that this is big school now. This is not daycare. And I give them a sense of confidence and excitement for what we're going to do, what we're going to learn. And our day always started with our Bible, which set the tone for the rest of our day. And was a star student. I had no problems with him.
Yeah. So literally your plan was not to have a discipline problem.
That's true. Now, all children are different. They come to you with all different personalities. There are some who like to take charge, but that was part of my strategy, is setting up where I stood in the class and what I expected of them. And yes, if there were times where somebody was trying my patience to see how far I would go, I gave them 3 strikes and you're out. So if I had to speak to them 3 different times for the same offense, then that meant 3 times, and you will give me some of your playtime.
Okay. Does that happen very much?
No.
Did it happen any this year?
No. None this year.
Not even once?
Not even once.
And I'll say that my mom, I think my first year, Miss Howard, I probably had 50 or 100 trips to the office, but of kids. It was a disaster, my first year was. But I can say in 3 years, I think I've had to refer 1 student to the office, because you do kind of get to where you understand how to prevent discipline problems, don't you?
Yes. I always told my parents that if I have a school issue at school, I like to try to handle it between me and the student first. When it gets to the point that the child is not willing to work with me, that's when I give them the option. You can either work with me, or we will give mom and dad a call and we will involve them. So I tried to give them choices.
Right.
That was the way that I taught them to grow and mature and start making good choices that pertain to themselves.
And your history speaks for itself, because we won't name names, but I can think of many, many children who came to you that were quite the handful for their parents, and their parents are just amazed at the beautiful transformation of their children to be such helpful and successful students, as well as successful in their homes. So you've got your discipline plan is not to have a problem, which is awesome. Do you have any other wisdom or secrets for teachers? Because there are a lot of new teachers coming into the profession of teaching. What advice do you wish that you had known in the earlier years of your teaching?
Well, I think the idea of expecting high standards and high ideals for my children, it's a transition from a K-4 class to a K-5 class. There's a big difference in that child. And they're coming out of that playtime syndrome, and they're coming into what I call real school, because not many students in K-5 learn to read, to write, learned their numbers. So we were a structured educational school, and that was part of setting high standards for the children. And getting them to make that transition was a big life change, not only for them, but also for their parents. Because their parents would see ways that I did stuff at school. And the children knew me well enough that they went home and said, but Miss Howard says this.
Like what?
Or Miss Howard does it this way. That especially came true the second half of our year, when the student was required to have reading homework 3 nights a week. And I always had parent conferences just before we made the transition, and I would instruct the parents on a good procedure to follow with homework. So it would be consistent with what the child was doing at school, and we would not be conflicting one way with another way. And that was very helpful. I gave them blend ladders. I showed them how I sounded out the letters, how I made words, and then carrying it a step further to use the words in sentences. And parents thought, oh, gosh, I never even thought of that. And so once they saw how I did it and got a feel for it, When the child would come home and say, but Miss Howard does it this way, then they would listen to the child because that was what the child was used to doing, and they wanted it to be consistent at home.
So we really believe in here at our school partnering with parents.
Oh, yes.
So you're not assuming that parents know how to teach this. You're partnering with them and helping them.
That's right. Well, the phonetic way of teaching reading has not always been taught in the schools. And a lot of the parents I've had through the years would sit down and say, you know, Miss Howard, I never was taught phonics. Thank you for showing me how to teach phonics to my child.
Yeah.
And it just kind of seemed to make sense to them.
So in your K-5 kindergarten year, about when are most, if not all, the students reading?
Well, we start reading right from the first day of school because our first letter that we introduce for teaching the sounds and the recognition and writing is we start with the 5 short vowels. That's our base. Then after we've covered each of the vowels, that they carry a short sound. We didn't go into long. That comes later. But then we would start adding the consonants, which then we could make a blend. And then the next step is to learn a consonant that we could add as a final consonant, and we've got words. We're reading. So I always tell my children, just because we're changing to reading groups and we have a reader, we've been reading since the first of school.
And how does it change a child when they start reading?
Well, when they pick up a book off of my children's library shelf, and I tell them, we start with the sight word the. I said, don't just look at the pictures now. You look at the words. See if you can find that sight word the. And you can see them. They'll be sitting there counting and say, Miss Howard, I saw so-and-so number of thes on this page. So that gets them then interested in the words. And it's amazing to parents when they're driving around in a car and the child sees a sign and said, oh, look, Mom, that's so-and-so. And the parents say, wow, you know, we're not just reading at school, but now they're learning it and they're able to read it out in public.
So is there any other wisdom as you think about, because one thing you do extremely well is you mentor younger teachers. So when you have a new younger teacher come to you and you know all the typical challenges younger teachers have, what are some of the things that you tell them as they're starting out teaching kindergarten or younger students?
Well, that can apply to any teacher who's going into a new grade level. You know, what do I do first? I always tell them, you get with your partner teacher, you find out what theme you're going to be doing the first of school so that you can get your room decorated, get it, put your personality into it. And then when you get ready to set up your daily schedule, find out what your et cetera classes are going to be, get you a time schedule, then you can plan out the subjects and look at the first week of school for plans. Don't look at the whole year and become overwhelmed. And that way you start out slow and you build from there. So your lesson plan for the first week and your schedule, daily schedule, then you feel like you're getting your feet on the ground and you can kind of see your direction.
So one of my mentors, Betty Shaver, who got me into teaching, always said, great teachers are repeaters. So pick what you repeat because that's what the kids will remember. So Ms. Howard, what are the things you repeat over and over to your classes and have for all these years?
Well, students need to know right up front what your classroom rules are. And you constantly are referring to them. That's why I always posted my discipline procedure right under the board at the front of the room. And one of them says, I will raise my hand to speak. And so, all I had to do was say, and I love to sing a song, I raise my hand when I want to speak. So that cuts the people who are yelling out or who are jumping up and down, because I tell them, I don't look at popcorn. I look for the people who are raising their hand quietly and patiently waiting their turn. So that gets the procedure in your classroom set up right away. And then that just continues. I know in earlier days, I would sing a lot of my directions because that gets their ear to something else. They hear you constantly speaking, and you start giving out reminders or directions. They tune you out. But you start with a song, then that's going to kind of pull them back in to your attention. And I always remember one little boy would turn around and he'd say to the people at his table, why does she keep singing? So you see, he didn't like it, but it made an impression on him. And that was just another tool.
So you just have 5 rules.
Yes.
What are your 5 rules?
The last one is keep your teacher happy.
Well, you're pretty easy to keep happy. There might be some teachers that are pretty hard to keep happy, huh?
Right. Well, if you follow the first 4, which is follow directions quickly, and if there were some who were kind of dragging, then I would start counting. And I would say you should be prepared by the time I get to 3. Raise your hand so that not everyone is speaking. And I also like to start teaching them public speaking in K-5. And that meant that when we were having large group learning time in phonics or in Bible or numbers, and I ask a question, I would ask them to please stand to speak. So that kind of gave them some confidence. They had to think on their feet, what am I going to say? How am I going to say it? That also helped then later in the year when we had reading groups. They would stand to read out loud. That kind of gives them the floor. It gives the others a chance to hear them. Some of the shy ones, I would teach them to project their voice so that we could all hear them. And it was amazing how that kind of reading had an effect on the people sitting in their chairs doing seat work, because they were tuned in to what they were doing on their desk, but they were also listening to what was going on. And I've always had the first grade teachers to come back and say, wow, Miss Howard, your students stand. When I asked them a question, they said, I love it. Everybody's expected to do public speaking. Right. Even when you meet someone for the first time, you need to be confident and you need to know, how to think on your feet. So I like to start that in K-5. That's another way of teaching this group that they're in big school now.
Yeah, I love that. So raise your hand for permission to speak. And then you have rule number 3, raise your hand for permission to leave your seat.
Right. If they need to use the restroom or they need to get a tissue or they need to get a project off of the cabinet, that just kind of gives them permission to get up and walk around. They didn't just have free-for-all and just get up. And like during reading groups, I had a rule. If we had a color cut and paste project, then they held their scraps in the corner of their desk until we either changed reading groups or reading groups were over. That way you don't have people being distracted in seat work time or in the reading group.
And then you have make smart choices, number 4, and keep your dear teacher happy, number 5.
Right. You see, K-5 is also a time where They're thinking about choices. Just like when I discipline a child, I always tell them why they can't do whatever they're trying to do. And second, I want them to think, do I want to keep acting silly or do I want to play the full time out at PE? Mm-hmm. Now, later in the year, the timeout kind of gets a little bit boring for the K-5. So where my classroom was situated was so that the student who did have timeout, I would start having them just stay in their seat with their head down. Mm-hmm. All the while, they could hear what was going on the playground. They could hear them running and playing. And so,
So but you don't have to do that a lot because, there's some folks who say, oh, don't take away playground. It's not like you have to do it much.
No, that's why you want them to make the choice. Mm-hmm. But you're putting it out there that if they decide, no, I don't want to stop, then it was their choice to stay in.
Right.
And so I like for parents to know that also.
So you teach public speaking, which most people would say, wow, for kindergarten. Of course, you teach the structure of learning. You help the parents learn how to teach the phonics and set those procedures so that you can consistently partner together. What are some of the other things that you teach in kindergarten that most kindergartners you don't think are taught?
My most important subject of the day is Bible. And we have flashcards that we use that come with our curriculum. The children learn Bible verse for each letter of the alphabet. So throughout the year, they are taught scripture that go with our alphabet. In addition to just saying the verse, I taught them to sing the verse. And that is a wonderful tool that goes home, a song in their heart. I've had parents to say, I've heard my son waking up on Saturday morning, just laying in his bed, and he'll be singing those Bible verses, Miss Howard. And those songs are the ones that stay in your heart.
Yeah.
And when I would grade memory verses, they would come to my desk and they would sing to me. And so that took a lot of courage and confidence to stand in front of me and sing where the whole class, of course, we were having activities, there were a lot of things going on, but they were confident enough to sing that song to me. So that helps them then at the end of the year when we have our kindergarten graduation program, then they're not afraid to get up and maybe do a little song with a small group or something.
Now, this year, truthfully, so many people were expecting that you would retire last summer, 2020, with the pandemic going on, and nobody would have blamed you, because you work with 5-year-olds. And yes, they wore their mask, but you know how well they wear their mask. They're 5 or 6. So tell us a little bit about why you decided you needed to teach one more year.
Well, I was excited when I heard that our school was going to go into zones, which made me feel a little more confident because I know that a lot of the older students, we have middle school and high school, they're more out and about, and that's kind of a good way for it to spread. And I like the fact that the preschoolers were in their own wing. We had our lunch here. We had our et cetera classes. Our librarian would come to us to read to them. Our music was done in a room down in our zone. And to me, that was a good security. I felt safe. And the students got out of their car. They walked through the front door of the school, and their temperatures were checked, and then they came right into our zone. And the only other time that we left our hallway except to go to the playground, but the opposite end was how we entered or exited our zone. And we would take them out into the lobby, put them in their car, and they were gone. We did not even go to the gymnasium that often because we had to cross a zone and go through the high school wing. So the coaches worked out in classroom activities for the PE time. And I will say this, I had less absences in my K-5 class this year than I think any year I've taught. Because you know how preschoolers, they pick up colds, they pick up stomach viruses, all of this, and it was just wonderful. Most of my students were here every single day. Yeah. Now, some of them would go out of town with their parents and maybe miss Friday or something, but there were no cases of flu. So I was very strict, as everyone was, about cleanliness, and we had our own space. And during activity time, they could stand at their desk and kind of talk to their neighbors around their neighborhood, and but they did not pair up and sit together and play with the same activity. And then each day, the activities that they used, I would give them a name stick, and they would put the name stick in the top of their activity container, and they used that activity for the week on the days that we had morning activities. Then at the end of the week, I would take the name sticks out and then put the activities out in the hall, and our aide would come and disinfect each set. So then on Monday, everything was fresh and clean, and we started over. Lunchtime was done right at our own desk. They did not get up and walk around, but when they were finished with their food, I picked up their trash with gloves and mask. I didn't let them get up and start walking around and dropping stuff. Every one of my children came in knowing how to wash their hands.
Isn't that awesome?
So I knew that parents had been working with them at home, and they would stand there and they would do the 20-second or better washing time, and we just had good disinfectant that I started the day with. They came into a clean desk. They had their own separate cubbies to hang their coats, put their lunchbox, their book bags, and their rest mats also stayed separated. So it was just a wonderful year.
But you know, there are a lot of teachers, and I don't blame those that say, I just don't want to risk it. I mean, you had to cope with the fact that you could catch something that could significantly harm, if not kill you or your husband. Or, I mean, how did you grapple with that?
Well, my husband and I spent a lot of time in prayer about it. And I did not have a peace about leaving it up to a new teacher to come in and deal with. And I liked the procedures that our school set up. They were different than any other school in our area. We had a plan. And parents liked that. And I liked that. I mean, this was the one year where I felt that I did not get as close to my parents one-on-one personal because they were not allowed in the school. We had conferences through our Zoom, a lot of emails. The face-to-face all had to come to a screeching halt. We celebrated birthdays, but parents had to supply individually wrapped goodies for treats for the lunchtime. And so the parent participation as well as the students, and then the plan that the school established. So I felt very confident and secure about doing that. And it didn't bother me to just leave a mask hanging around my neck And when I was standing in front of the classroom, I removed my mask because I found that you can't teach phonics very easily with a mask because those sounds are so important. So, but then as I walked among the children, helping them with writing or looking at their papers and things, then I would pull my mask up because I was standing over them talking. And so, from that standpoint, and we were able to socially distance our desks and singing. When they went to music, they did wear a mask, and then here in the classroom, the only time that I did do a little singing was when I was teaching them their Bible verse. So we tried, to just keep our breath to ourselves, so to speak.
So you said that you feel like you weren't quite as close to the parents. Do you feel like you were as close to the kids this year?
Oh, definitely. Definitely. Yes.
Some people have said they felt closer to the kids this year.
Yes, I did. I felt very, very comfortable with my children. I felt a good rapport with each one of them. I love for them during their activity time or when they first come in, most of them always had something they wanted to talk to the teacher about. And that is when you really get to know the heart of the students that you're teaching. You know what they're thinking, and you know their relationship with their siblings and with their parents. So it was just an overall wonderful year, one of the best, which was the perfect way, because all through the year, the Lord did speak to me and to my husband and gave us indications that this would be the final year.
Yeah.
And so this
You're definitely
year,
going out on top.
This year, I feel at peace with this decision that I have made, as does my husband. Now, I'm in the process of setting up a resource room to leave with my preschool department. My collection, over 44 years of collecting children's books. I'm sitting right now around 12 huge tubs full of books, and they are already correlated to go with our resource units. They're numbered, and they're going to set up a resource room so that the preschool teachers will have access to the books, because that was another very, very important learning tool to me, was reading to my children.
Yeah.
They always said, "Oh, Miss Howard, do we have time for a story?" And story time was an important time as well.
So as you look back over the 44 years, every teacher should have things they stand for. What do you feel like the things are that you stand for, you and your career as a teacher?
Well, first and foremost, I would like to be known as a teacher who loved the Lord, who saw to it in her classroom that her children were spiritually settled in a good foundation. I like to use my Bible time not just to tell a Bible story of what happened back in Bible days, but how does that Bible story relate to me today? What can I learn from that Bible story? And the verses that we learned to memorize and sing, how does that apply to me? And my theme for my children for many years has been, God has a plan for your life. And you need to stay in the Word. And, they'll say, "But Miss Howard, I don't know what I want to be when I grow up." I said, "That's fine." I said, "But God is working with you. God's giving you interests that will give you ways that when you're older, you'll know what God has given you the desire to do." And I said, "That's the way He leads you into where He wants you to go." So that has been my theme.
Yeah.
Yes.
And you had a graduating senior last year who was quite rambunctious as a K-5 and named you his star teacher. So it does, he knew where he got the foundation of knowing how to, he was quite rambunctious, wasn't he?
Yes, he was. And I'll never forget, and I always used him as an example to my children because our media center sets up a summer reading challenge. And the parents are to write down the books and the number of pages that the children read during the summer. And they bring that list back to their first grade teacher. And then awards are given first, second, and third place for the children in first grade who read the most pages. And the day that I introduced summer reading group to this young man, he got in the car and he said, "Mama, I'm going to win that trophy in first grade." And she did not have to remind him, ask him had he read. I also encouraged him to go to the public library, get their own reading card now that they were going into first grade, which is another great incentive to go to the library. And he did win that first place award. And his mom said, I never had to encourage him or remind him. So, yes, it was a surprise. You never think of a senior in high school remembering what happened in their kindergarten class.
Yeah.
And
but it's happened with you. There's a lot of folks who come back and talk about you. In fact, I had a student in my film class. We were coming down here to film something on this hall, and somebody said, one of my students said, "Oh, that's Miss Howard's class. Be quiet. I'm still afraid of her." Not in a bad way, but
but see, he knew my standards.
He knows your standards, and they were tiptoeing, and he was a junior at the time, and he knew that he better be quiet because this was Miss Howard's hall. So as we finish up, this is definitely an extended version, but it has been worth it. You're getting ready to hand off to another generation of teachers, and many are listening all over the world to this at your story. And I think it's important for us to share the stories of the greats who've come before us. What is your dream and your wish for kindergarten teachers all over the world as they look at moving forward next year and the kids come back?
Well, I certainly would love for them to have confidence and know that beyond a shadow of a doubt, they have the heart and the love for the grade that they're teaching. That should be first. When you feel that you're in the right place, then you're going to feel happy and encouraged, and that's going to get your creative juices going so that you can make and enhance your curriculum, enhance your program. Give them those little extra things that make the kids want to jump out of that car in the morning and get to school. I've had children cry because they woke up with a fever and couldn't go to school, but I want to go see Miss Howard. Well, you have to have something here that gives them that oomph to get up and get here. And so you yourself have got to have that feeling. Second, establish your expectations. Just what do you expect of these K-5 children or whatever grade you're teaching? Because each grade level is preparing them for something bigger. So you need to, think about where they are, what they should be able to do now, and then giving them the confidence to come into your class and do it. But the love for you for teaching has got to start in your heart. And then as you continue, you will have a heart for teaching that keeps you growing.
I love that.
Keeps you excited. And you're always thinking about, well, how could I do that different next year? Every year you're going to learn things new. Every year you're going to have new students. Every year you're going to have a different class of people. So you're going to constantly be changing just because of the students that you have. And then when the time comes that you feel that this is where you should pull the line, leave it then for others younger, then you will leave with a heart that says, I know I did my best. I have done my job, and I feel that the Lord is happy with what has taken place.
Yeah.
My biggest point about retirement, number one on my retirement list is self-care. Because I feel that it's time now for me to self-care myself. So I'm going to have a special quiet place in my home, which I already have, a place where I sit. If I don't do anything but just sit and think, it's a rocking chair. But it's a place where I can have my devotions, I can pray, and I can also stay there and listen to the Lord speak back to me. Of course, enjoy being at home, enjoy, my husband, but self-care now is what I think is needed, because retirement is a huge life change.
Very much.
And you've got to take care of yourself, and you've got to establish your routine now. So I'm looking forward to it. It's an exciting time, but it's also a sad time to be packing up where I've been living for the last few years in a new classroom. But I'm happy to know that I'm leaving my legacy of children's books and resources that I have collected over the years, and hope that through this material, a seed will be planted in that child's heart to help them grow and mature.
Yeah. Well, thank you for listening to this extended episode with one of my heroes, Miss Howard. I know there were some days for me where I would get nervous about coming to school. The news has been just off the charts, or off the chain, as the kids will say. And I would think to myself, Miss Howard, as I sat in my Durango in the back parking lot, Miss Howard's here today. I'm going to get up here, put on my mask, and do it too. It's been an interesting year, but it has been an important year. And thank you for finishing so well and for telling your story. Thank you, Mrs. Howard.
Thank you very much, Vicki. I enjoyed it.